Welcome to Shining Bright, the FarmHER radio show all about women doing great things. Women who are making the ordinary extraordinary. Women following their passion, taking action, and making a difference for themselves and others. Join me, Margie, as your host on Shining Bright by FarmHER. Hello and welcome to Shining Bright. Today, this little mini farm herd here is Carly and I.
Hello.
And we've got a topic coming up. In the past probably 6 months, it has come to my attention more than ever before about healthcare and specifically the mental health care in rural America and maybe the needs that aren't being met out there. And the crisis that is occurring with not just rural America, but within farming. Mm-hmm. And so I strongly believe in elevating that discussion. I myself am far, far from a professional. I don't know all of the right things to say or do, but I do know that talking about it is a great path to opening things up. So we're going to kick this off this morning and talk about issues that affect health of rural Americans. I did a little research and we're going to be talking to Linda Emmanuel from AgriSafe in just a little bit. And Linda is a registered nurse and she focuses on women's health. So she'll have lots of really good suggestions and ideas for everybody. But in trying to understand the issues myself, according to a Stanford University rural health website, rural communities make up about 20% of Americans. Mm-hmm. But less than 10% of physicians reside in those rural communities. And Carly, I know you live, I live in like a suburb, right? There's no difference between, right, Des Moines and where I live. But you live in a small town, probably 20 miles south of Des Moines, maybe?
Yeah. We're not too far removed from Des Moines.
Yeah. Do you see healthcare issues, like lack of healthcare in your community, or are you close enough to a city that it hasn't affected?
Yeah, not necessarily in my community. Most of us do come to Des Moines, especially like for delivering babies, surgeries, anything major like that.
Yeah.
And we do have a really great physician in town. And I also come to Carlisle for my physician. So we're not too far removed, but I know my friends that live in rural Iowa that don't have access to a big town within 30 minutes or an hour. They struggle.
Yeah.
I know I was talking to one of my friends about an epidural. It wasn't available.
Oh, dear God.
Was. Yeah. Yeah. And they had other options that they just didn't have a physician that
an anesthesiologist probably wasn't on staff.
Yep.
Yeah. So there's a real side effect.
She had options, but I mean, to get to any major hospital, it would have been a couple hours. And when it's time to deliver a baby, you don't always
get
have
that
2
choice.
hours.
Yeah.
So it definitely is a real issue.
Yeah. And I guess something that you take into effect knowing, or, you're aware of when you live in a rural community, because I don't see that changing necessarily, but I did see that USDA or through the American, people call it Obamacare. That's not the right term for it.
Yep.
But the ACA has more than doubled the size of the National Health Service Corps, which, among other things, offers scholarships and loan repayment to health practitioners in return for practicing in rural communities.
Really?
Which I think, it's something that they're working on. They're aware of. Yeah. And I think programs like that, there's been programs like that for teachers to work in underserved communities for a long time. I think stuff like that is super cool. And that can go a long way because...
And just like Linda, was practicing in a little bit smaller community, but we had a gal by the name of Callan. Mm-hmm. She went to school for rural health.
Yep.
And she was on one of our panels at the I Am FarmHER event that we had this past June. So there is some opportunity, and there's women and men that grew up on the farm that are really interested in this. So that's great to know that there's some advantage to going into rural healthcare.
Yeah. I think that's with anything in rural America. It takes someone who cares about it, who wants to return to that community.
And who knows what these farmers are talking about.
Yeah. Like they've been in that situation. On that note, it's one thing to say that resources are lacking, but when one of the things we're going to talk to Linda about is, things that you can do also to take care of yourself on the front side of this before you have health issues. Yeah. And as women, I know taking care of ourselves we don't always put that at the top of the list, but it's a pretty important thing to be able to take care of yourself so that you can help take care of others, right?
It is. Because when you start taking care of yourself, you really feel
Good.
A lot better.
Yeah. It's amazing. On that note, is there any apps? I mean, because there may not be a YMCA right around the corner, or there may not be money to join a fitness club or something like that, even if there is one. So what are some of the ways that you stay fit? Yeah.
Well, I need to do a little more of it.
No, you don't.
But my mom and I actually have started walking our gravel roads. We've done that actually for quite a few years. And that's one way that her and I like to do it. We used to run all the time, hopefully get back into that more. Yeah. And then I also use my FitnessPal app. Yep. The most important thing is to make sure your body is nourished. So a lot of these diets that are out aren't focusing on that. But if you can use an app that actually tells you your proteins and macros and stuff like that, that's the important thing.
Yeah. And that's right there at your fingertips. Well, thanks, Carly, for your input. Everybody stick with us. We'll be right back here in just a few minutes on Shining Bright by FarmHER. Hello and welcome to Shining Bright by FarmHER. Today we're going to be talking about the health and well-being of farmers in the United States, and specifically how that relates to women. So I have got Carly Cummings here in the studio with me. Good morning. And on the phone, we're talking to Linda Emmanuel. Linda, good morning.
Good morning, ladies of the FarmHER herd. I'm glad to be here and excited to discuss this important topic with you.
Yeah, well, we are appreciative to have you. Our relationship goes back a number of years, well before. So you're talking to us from the organization that you're with today, AgriSafe. But Linda, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I think we met a number of years ago, and I met you before your position with AgriSafe. So I'd love to introduce everybody to you.
Yes, you did. So as Margie said, my name is Linda Emmanuel, and I am from East Central Nebraska. I am part of our family's farm. We are a 3-generational farm family. We grow row crops, specifically corn, soybeans, and seed corn. We also help our sons with their cow-calf herd operation. We have 3 grown sons now, and I'm happy to say we have 3 lovely daughter-in-laws in the family, and just recently a new granddaughter. So life is exciting here. I'm also a registered nurse, and when I met Margie, I was working in a hospital setting, of which I did for over 31 years. And I just had this pull after our youngest had went away to college that there was something more that I needed to do, to learn more, do more, and be more within my own world. And so I took a little bit of a leap, and I applied and was accepted into a leadership program through the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, where we studied leadership within the agricultural world on a state, national, and international level. And through all of those experiences and seminars, I was introduced to the Central State Center of Ag Safety and Health, which is located at UNMC, University of Nebraska Medical Center's Public Health College. And through them, I took an ag medicine course, which provided me continuing education hours to keep my nursing license. And through them, as the network continued, I was introduced to AgriSafe Network. And that is where my story began last December. So I took a walk through uncertainty, and here I am.
Well, that is actually, I don't know that I knew every step of that path. So I'm glad to hear that, Linda. But yeah, you have a unique perspective because you've got that healthcare perspective and you're a farmer. And so can you tell us a little bit about AgriSafe, what your role is there now?
Certainly. I'm a community health nurse, which means I am the boots on the ground gal. I'm reaching out to producers and ag business across our nation. We are a nonprofit national organization started 15 years ago, actually, in your state of Iowa. And it was started by rural health nurses who saw that there were disparities among farmers and ranchers in their everyday work. And so they took the steps and formed an organization along with some other expert help. And what we do is we take research evidence-based information and share that, translate it down to the farmers and producers. Across the United States, there are 9 ag centers that are doing this amazing, crazy good research on how we can prevent injuries and exposures to farmers and ranchers. And so that's what I do is I go out, I speak at presentations. AgriSafe also has webinars available. We do customizable on-site talks, and constantly trying to stay ahead of the emerging issues that are happening within the agricultural world as related to health.
Yeah, and it's a unique a unique perspective, I think. I mean, we see this a lot. I mean, people who are working long hours with big machinery, sometimes small machinery, whatever, machinery, right?
Yep.
Where injuries can occur really easily. And yeah, I know you presented at at our I Am FarmHER conference recently. And there's so many things that I think it's important to keep in front of people when you're working like this every day. So Linda, in this first segment, I know we're going to jump into some mental health discussion a little bit later, but talking about women's health in rural America, and specifically as it relates to farming, what are some of the issues that you see most often occurring out there? What are some of the things that people walk up to you and say when you're at these events?
So women are primarily the safety officers of our farms, unofficially. We're the ones that see things from a different perspective, and we're juggling all of those balls in the air that I think you've talked about, Margie. We're taking care of our children. We have a strong interest in our farms and the health within our farms, the successfulness of our farms, as well as side hustle. We are bringing in that outside income. So it's a matter of juggling all of those balls. The most often question I get asked is usually about respiratory protection. What is the best mask to use depending on the environment they're working in? As females, a lot of it is ergonomic. Spine injuries are of a concern. And just as far as females and their influence, how it is now more validated than it was 20, 30 years ago. And so how our influences can change the whole landscape of our farming operations.
Yeah. And we learned that when we were at I Am FarmHER from you, Linda. And I know all of those women, from the feedback that we got a lot out of what you were teaching them. So can you tell us a little bit about the programs that these women can get involved in within AgriSafe? I know one that really struck a chord with me was your yoga program. I thought that was a really neat on-farm opportunity for these ladies.
Yeah, so that is kind of interesting. You know, it's always amazing to me how the stars align when you least expect it. So again, as my children started to leave the house, I turned back my focus a little bit more upon myself, which is easy to forget when you're a mother. Yeah. Thanks. I took the initiative. And we just happened to have in our little small town of 1,200, a gal came back and was teaching yoga classes. And I thought, well, let's just see what this is all about. And so 10 years ago, I started practicing yoga. And I have found it to be such benefit to my back, to my neck, and my overall ability to feel good about myself, my balance. I just feel better in the morning. And so as I was talking to our executive director at AgriSafe about yoga, she's like, we have been wanting to, for years, start a program that physically readies the females, because that is my focus, is women's health, to ready the females for their work on the farm. And so we developed a poster that specifically targets those muscle groups that are most stressed, most worked on the farm, in hopes that the females will put it up in their barn or in their shops. And remember to stretch every day and to take those deep breaths along with stretching. All of those pulled together really help us to feel better.
I agree with you. We have, I know I've seen you there, Linda, at our early morning yoga sessions at our conferences, but it always like just rejuvenates me when I stop and take the time for myself, which can be really tough sometimes. How do we've got about a minute left. How do we find that poster? Like how can we help people help themselves? Is it something they can see online?
You bet. So all they need to do is go to our website, which is agrisafe.org, when that is spelled AGRI, safe, SAFE.org, and then click on the women's tab, and then that link will be there. So we focus on yoga as well as Pilates. So there's also some Pilates instructions there, because we know if we strengthen our abdominal and our back muscles, that alone helps to protect our spine. And so, yeah, do tap into those.
I definitely will. I feel like we need to put it up at our office. There's only a few of us, but we could use a reminder, right? To
we
stop
could find
and
time
breathe.
At work and do it.
Yeah. Pilates saved me after I had a C-section too. So I'm a big advocate of that. It saved my core. So thank you everybody for joining the FarmHER journey today. Be sure to tune into our TV show 9:30 Eastern on RFD TV Fridays and Sundays. We'll be right back with Shining Bright. Welcome back to Shining Bright by FarmHER. Carly and I are here talking to Linda Emmanuel, and Linda is a FarmHER first. I always have to say that because that's your, what'd you say, 3 generations?
Yes.
Yeah. And, but you work for AgriSafe and you work on women's health specifically as your focus. And because we always talk during the breaks, but nobody else can hear us, I'm going to repeat what we were just talking about. You know, getting ready for this radio show. I mean, there's a lot of things. We juggle this small business. People out there listening juggle a farm, which is a small business, you know, and you're doing it with your family and long hours and, you know, the up and down of income and of all the pressures out there can really lead to a lot of stress. And we were just talking about the stress of, you know, you have to talk on the radio for an hour, right? And pay attention to what you're saying and cross your fingers that you sound decent. But, but stress is real, right? Good stress, bad stress. I just said this to my dad on the phone the other night. I was talking about all the things that are going on in our world. And he's like, well, you know, it'll be okay. And I was like, I know, Dad, but I'm just saying, like, good stress is still stress, you know, and we all deal with it differently. But and this leads me into mental health is such a rising topic in agriculture, and what we're going to spend the bulk of the rest of our show talking about. We have a episode of FarmHER on RFD TV coming up that focuses on mental health in agriculture. It's a studio episode, so add more stress because I had to talk on a teleprompter, which is something that I don't do, but yeah. I do, I guess. But anyway, Linda, as mental health is this rising topic of discussion in agriculture, it's kind of been brought to the forefront. At least I see it popping up a lot, which I think is really important. What is your take overall on what has really been billed as a crisis? I mean, the numbers that you see show that farmers' suicide rates are higher than that of veterans, you know, and there's just this ongoing discussion. What's your take on what's going on out there?
You know, there's so many factors within a farmer's life. Our work life, our personal life, our home life is all intersected. We just do not have that 8 hours of work that you clock in, you clock out, and you can go home and forget those stressors and decompress, so to speak. There's not that opportunity on the farm. And we know in agriculture, years of affluence can easily yield to years of anguish. Right now, we've been in a downward market since 2013. And a lot of that downturn market are factors completely outside of our control as a farmer. A lot of it is dependent on ag policy, global policy. We also know that Mother Nature's fickle hand can easily destroy a crop with one little single swipe. The number of years my husband and I have had to endure hailstorms where you wake up in the morning and your crop is beautiful, lush and green. And by 9 o'clock at night, that storm comes through and you're down to tiny shreds on the ground. And that is devastating. We also do not have accessibility to quality, good behavioral health counselors or providers in the rural areas. And so all of this compiles and builds on each other, and pretty soon it becomes a crisis. And as you said, a little stress is good. It makes us do things, get up in the morning and get our tasks completed. But that chronic stress over time definitely takes a toll on our health physically and mentally. And the mental load is real. It's huge. And so it's time we address these issues once again.
Yeah, it is so real. I mean, and it just doesn't stop, too. That's the thing that gets me. I mean, in a small business or in farming and in all of these uncontrollables, it just doesn't stop. Like, you don't get Sunday off, you know, you aren't just like,
everybody's got to eat every single day.
Yeah. Give me a few hours where I can shut this off. Well, you just can't.
Nope.
And Linda, one of the things you mentioned, and we may talk about this a little bit more later, lack of access to mental health resources. I definitely agree. Some of the statistics I saw were that, less than 10% of physicians practice in rural communities overall, but rural communities make up about 20% of all Americans. So obviously, just in physicians, but mental health resources, I think, are seriously lacking everywhere in our country, rural America, or urban or not. But I have to wonder, though, that in agriculture and just kind of the machoism isn't the right word. I can't think of the right word right now. But if there were more resources, do you think that people would take advantage of those, or is it like showing weakness almost? I don't think it is, but I always wonder, like, would more resources make a difference? A stigma. Yeah, that stigma that goes along with it. Thank you, producer Tony, for putting the word on my computer screen of what I needed to say. But what's your take on that? Is there something that is out there that would be causing people to not reach out and get that help if the resources were there?
You bet. It is the stigma and the pride. Farmers have this stealth core value of work and independence, and so to admit that they mentally have something awry is difficult. You can talk to your friends about cancer. If a farmer is diagnosed with cancer, the community surrounds, supports, and yes, we can fix this. Here's our treatment plan. But when it comes to mental health, that is still a gray area.
And Linda, I grew up on a farm, and my family still actively farms, and this is something that's always top of mind to me because I know my dad and brother and uncle are that macho and they would not
say anything. Are there
any warning signs that people should be aware of when it's time to start encouraging somebody to go get help? And how do we effectively encourage them to seek help?
There are, there's some of it is observation. If you notice that maybe the person that you're working with, your coworker there on the farm, is acting a little different, you notice that they're losing weight. They might talk about that they're extremely fatigued, continuously fatigued, something different than, your normal seasonal fatigue that happens when you're putting in the long hours. They may not be able to connect the dots as easily. Their brain just is not working as clearly as it used to be. Maybe they're more irritable. They don't feel like they're useful or needed. And maybe those things that give them joy just isn't there anymore. Then those might be some warning signs to start asking some questions. And we often say here in AgriSafe to be bold, ask those questions. During the past 2 weeks, have you often been bothered by feeling down or depressed or hopeless? Have you been bothered, by things that used to give you interest and pleasure, and now they're not as enjoyable anymore? So it's about asking questions and then having that empathetic, that listening ear. That's a start.
Yeah. Well, Linda, thank you for that. This conversation needs to be continued. We have got to go to break here. I want to thank all of you joining us here on Shining Bright by FarmHER. Come join our FarmHER journey today. Check out our website. Check out the events tab over on our website. See where we're going to be next. Stick with us. We're talking with Linda Emmanuel from AgriSafe.
And we are back with Shining Bright. We have Linda Emmanuel with AgriSafe with us today. And Linda, before we went to break, we were talking about stress on the farm and how we can maybe observe any warning signs if we, like me, I'm a daughter, I'm not back on the farm, but I still see them almost every day. So how we can point out those warning signs. And when we were at break, we were talking about the generational pressures. You were on a generational farm, and I wanted to get your observations about how to integrate somebody back to the farm, maybe after college, and how we can maybe lessen some of that stress.
Exactly. We are, as you said, a generational farm, 3 generations. My father-in-law, who is 80 years old and still has a hog confinement operation and cattle and loves to help the guys with the row crop operation. My husband, my brother-in-law, and then 2 of our 3 sons are back farming with us. And so before our first son came back to farm, we were very fortunate. Through the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, there was a program offered called Returning to the Farm. And it was a college credit class for Jordan. And there were 4 weekends that we went down to UNL and heard various speakers present on everything from financial planning to how are the roles going to be defined on your farm. Mental health was part of it, handling the stress and sharing of the workload, and communication. That was a big one too, and understanding personalities. So, generational farms are interesting. Dynamics can have very different looks, and there's twists and turns in the day, and communication, personalities, all of that all weighs into how this whole farming operation will flow.
Yeah, and then you have to have like Sunday dinner together still, right? I think
exactly.
Yeah, shutting that off. I mean, I can attest to this. We don't farm, but with FarmHER, Tony is now a part of. I mean, he always has been there in the background, but now he's on FarmHER. He's on our team. You won't see him on the website. He still doesn't want to be pictured on the website, but it's near impossible to shut it off when it's your livelihood, and it can be such a difficult thing. One person that I want to talk about, as you ladies are talking, that popped into my mind is Megan Brown, and she's been on our podcast and our radio show, and she's been on our TV show. She is a 6th-generation rancher in California, and she's an only child. So she wasn't going to come back to the farm. She went off to college and she had other plans, but then reality hits, and who's going to carry that on if she doesn't, right? And so she's back there full time. She works with her dad. There's a lot of pressure with that from what I understand. And, she's in a rural area, like even just like meeting people and having friends. But what Megan does, I see her do such a great job at, and she's very vocal about mental health. She connects with people online in a major way. She spends a lot of time there talking to people, and you feel like you know her because of it, but that pressure is real. I mean, Carly, if something happened to your brother, and I mean, he's there on the farm every day, but It would be, what would you do? Right?
Yeah. I mean, I would feel obligated. I want to make sure that farm goes on for generations. I mean, my brother now has a 2-year-old little boy.
And it needs to be there.
It needs to be there for him. He loves the farm. He loves his tractors. Mm-hmm. He will tell you all about his tractors every day. And I mean, I think it's a family obligation, and that can be really stressful for some people, especially I know a lot of families only have girls, and there's no problem with a girl going back to the farm, but sometimes that's just not what they want to do. Right. And so I actually worked at Iowa State before I worked here with FarmHER, and there were programs that they had started to help with that transition. They would actually pair people that were in college that wanted to farm but didn't have the opportunity to with families that didn't have a succession plan. So there's always opportunities out there. And like you mentioned, Linda, with that UNL program, but it's having the gumption to reach out and make sure that succession will be there.
Yeah.
It's a tough discussion. My parents farm as well as of course Tom's, and so now my parents have hit retirement age, and so for the last 5, 6, 8 years, we've had discussion amongst the 3 siblings with mom and dad, very frank, upfront, honest discussions is how is this farm going to carry on to the next generation? How are things going to be divided? And it's important discussions, and sometimes they are painful, but it's so good. It's therapeutic, really, to have those discussions at that table and to have that understanding of what your parents' wishes are for the farm. And when you were talking there, Carly, it reminded me, I had a discussion with your intern, Hannah, during the I Am FarmHER in Kansas City, and her concerns about going back to the farm and the dynamics and complexities. And so they are all real. They're all very valid concerns. My suggestion is to communicate. And hopefully you'll yield a good result.
Yeah. And sometimes, just from times in my personal life, I can tell you that there's value in talking to somebody outside of your family if you're struggling with the stress of some of this, right? Because, obviously keep the conversation lines open within your family, but there's such value in, being able to kind of share your load that you're carrying with somebody outside of your family, I think. And that's where those counselors and those professionals come into play for sure.
Absolutely. Those skilled mediators at the different conferences I've spoke at, there are plenty of professional, great people out there who understand the family dynamics and trying to sort it all out to make some sense and give a new perspective. So tap into those people. Absolutely.
Well, Linda, we've got a couple minutes left in this segment, but I wanted to talk a little bit, bringing it back to specifically mental health in agriculture. What is AgriSafe doing with some of your outreach efforts specific to this area, this topic?
So we do have on our website readily available a resource called Mental Health and the Impact on Wellness for Farm Families. It talks about the symptoms, what to watch for poor mental health, and when those symptoms escalate or continue, that it's time to talk to your healthcare provider and starting those conversations with your provider. We always encourage good health habits, laying off the caffeine when it gets close to bedtime and practice those good sleep hygiene habits. Good diet. I know in farming sometimes it's hard to get that nice square meal every day because you're so busy running, but trying to achieve good nutrition, exercise. Again, the yoga comes back in mind, and just even going for a walk or remembering to breathe. Take a little bit of time to meditate and to breathe. We're also collecting information from other agencies, other organizations about mental health in farming. And we're also watching in the current Farm Bill, there is a bill introduced called Stemming the Tide of Rural Economic Stress and Suicide. And what it does, it aims to bring farmers and ranchers and ag workers greater access to mental health treatment. So we're very much aware.
Wonderful. I mean, like I said, I can't say it enough. Sometimes having those things right in front of you, printing off that sheet and looking at it. Tony just sent a message behind the scenes here. When you said to remember to breathe, he took a deep breath. And I can't say I did, but I should have. But I have that app on my phone or my watch. I don't know if you guys have Apple Watches out there, but it starts tapping your wrist and it says, don't forget to breathe. And then it leads you through a breathing exercise. It's a wonderful thing. So we are getting ready to go to break here. Thank you for joining us on Shining Bright by FarmHER. Be sure to tune in every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern and Saturday at noon Eastern on Rural Radio 147 and the SiriusXM app. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Shining Bright by FarmHER. We've been having a good discussion. I can't say it's an exciting discussion, but on some levels it is an exciting discussion because I think once you open up the conversation, a little bit of weight gets lifted off of people's backs. It does off of mine for sure. There's power in sharing that with other people. But what we do here at FarmHER is we love to share stories of women in agriculture who, are doing amazing things and in their own right, in their own way. And as we lead up to our mental health special that we're going to have on our television show on RFD TV, that show really focuses on the stories of 3 women who've been a part of our FarmHER world, some of them on the TV show, some of them not, and issues that they've dealt with, whether it be with their family or themselves personally. And one of the women, Michelle Erickson Jones, is from Montana. She is a generational farmer. She left the farm, went to college, got a job, worked outside of the farm, and now has come back. And she has 2 young boys. Actually, I photographed her when she was pregnant, 9 months pregnant with, she was ready to have the baby when I photographed her the first time with her first son. And she has another son now. And she wrote a blog that really stuck out to me. I talk about it all the time because it's real and I've been there and I understand that she was struggling. She didn't realize she was struggling so heavily with postpartum depression after the birth of her second child. But to paraphrase what she said in her blog, she found herself her kids were in the bathtub and she was laying on the floor bawling and couldn't pick herself up, and finally realized that she needed a little bit of help. And so just telling her husband was the first major step of, I can't keep this all together right now. And as you all know, it's a hormonal thing with postpartum depression. I'm tearing up here. Sorry, Carly, if you're looking at me, but it's such a tough thing. And I think that, lack of resources, maybe not having healthcare available or near you. But in Michelle's case, she went and reached out to her doctor, got some medication to get her through this and saw a light at the end of the tunnel and asked for help, and because she asked for help, she was able to get through it and she put it out there and she talks about it, which I think is another really big, scary thing. But that's one of the stories that you'll hear on that episode. But Linda, I'm sure that you run across these stories every day. Is there anybody specific or anything specific maybe that you've run across that there's value in sharing, maybe in how they got through it or how they dealt with it or something like that?
Of course, there are stories every day out there. And in my work, I am not a specialist, and I'll list that up front as a disclaimer. I will certainly guide people, and I will listen to them and try to help them find the resources. But as you talked about, Megan, postpartum depression is real. It's very scary because this is supposed to be a wonderful, exciting time of your life. And, you're struggling. I have to say that I've noticed more that's caught my eye is that millennials are very aware of the mental load and the stress, and they want to do something about it. They're just not going to gunny sack it, put it away as my generation probably tended to do. They know there's help out there, and so they're looking for assistance and finding that help. I've also, I can tell you stories from the 80s, and there's some lines that parallel that farm crisis of 1980s. But I think the options are out there, and it excites me to know that Megan knew that she needed to do something and to ask for help. And it is a combination of medication and talk therapy that yields the best success. So, when I think about stories of today versus the stories of the 80s, I just hope and of course pray that people reach out and just talk about it.
I feel the same way. I'm one of those millennials that I will talk about it if I have the right person to talk about it with, but I get more stressed about wondering what's going on with my own family and our own farm and not knowing what they're thinking and not knowing how to get them to talk.
Right.
I think that's our biggest struggle is just even communicating as a farm family.
Yeah. I think, like having some sort of a plan in your mind or an idea in your mind, but sometimes I agree that's the scariest when you don't know what's going on. You have scenarios that go through your head that, aren't.
They're probably scarier than what's going on.
Reality.
But
yeah. Absolutely. You're exactly right, Carly. What we don't know is the worst. And that's what can lead to those crazy thoughts and fears. But it's having that one-on-one conversation and asking those open-ended questions with that person and showing that you truly care in your heart, that you really care of what's going on with them. And the nonverbals are huge too, leaning in just a little bit, that eye-to-eye contact, maybe even holding a hand. Again, it's awareness and educate to get those solid facts about suicide and what to look for. And ironically enough, this week is Suicide Awareness Week. I'm not sure if you girls were aware of that. And so there are some resources out there online. And I was this morning looking on the online suicide warning signs. And this was put out by the National Suicide Prevention Organization. Support groups, pastoral groups, organizations like that can help with the awareness factor, what to watch for, and then what to do from there. What if someone comes to you with some genuine concerns that you're worried about? What do you do to take those next steps to get them some help?
And Linda, on that note, specific resources, I know you mentioned the National Suicide Awareness Organization. Is there any other places where, if you're wondering, if you have like this inkling and you're sitting here listening to this going, I don't think something's quite right with my husband or something's not quite right with me, like where could somebody go as a start to look at some of these resources online?
So there is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and there's an 800 number that's available, and it is toll free and it's 24-hour availability. There's an online chat option as well through the National Suicide Prevention Network, and so Googling that to get you those numbers, and I can share that number. The Prevention Lifeline number is 1-800-273-8255, which the letters would be TALK. So 1-800-273-TALK.
Mm-hmm. Well, that sounds fitting. I appreciate that. And obviously AgriSafe, your website was agrisafe.org. You guys have a number of resources that hopefully can help all along this health journey, right? Not just when you get to the severe parts of it, but things that we can all do every day to help take better care of ourselves, which is super important if we're going to help take care of other people as women. I think that's a definite important one. So Linda, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a great talk. And I really appreciate your involvement.
Oh, thank you, Margie. You're exactly right. It's a serious issue, but sharing it together lightens the load. And we're all here to celebrate and to motivate each other. So yeah, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you, girls.
Yep. Thanks much, Linda.
Thank you.
Hello and welcome back to Shining Bright. So we have had what I view as a really important discussion today about mental health and agriculture. And as I've already said, I personally take it as a challenge and something important that we at FarmHER can do, and that's elevating the conversation in having that conversation, at least bringing it up. I've said I'm definitely no expert, but I know that I can share the stories of some of the people who have been affected by mental health struggles and who are willing to put it out there. So on that note, I want to point you all to a mental health and agriculture FarmHER special episode that we have put together. It's going to air Friday, October 5th on RFD TV at 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central. And it's during Mental Health Awareness Week. And it's a tough topic to talk about, no matter what side of it you are on. And I can tell you that it doesn't leave anybody out of this conversation. And I recently wrote an article that'll be in the November Successful Farming magazine in our FarmHER column there. And I just want to share that with you. Some days are hard. Heck, some months and years are hard. Sometimes it's a job problem, or maybe it's a family thing, sick kids, aging parents, money, land, life. Sometimes, though, everything in the world can be right, and the days are still hard. Sometimes, despite having every reason to power through, you just feel like you can't. Have you ever felt like that? You're not alone. Does someone you love struggle? You're not alone in that either. There have been times in my life where the days seemed really, really hard. Today, still at 38 years in, I'm learning how to be my best self and to manage it when I'm not. I've learned that equal parts supportive family, sunshine on my face, and a run down the path in the morning keep me in a good place. But it's taken me a long time to get to there. One of the stories I've had the pleasure of sharing is that of Michelle Jones, which I shared earlier in this episode. She's a farmer from Montana, and she shared her personal story on her blog about a dive into postpartum depression following the birth of her second child. Her blog is bigskyfarmher.com. For Michelle, the weight started to lift when she shared her struggles with her family and her doctor. Knowing you can ask for help is important. Getting it is even more important. So here's what I want to ask all of you. Let's work together to elevate this message. Can you think of right now listening to this somebody who might be struggling? You're not sure, but they might be struggling, or maybe you yourself are struggling. What I want to ask you to do is to open up the conversation. Reach out to those around you for support. If you're not sure where to turn, just talk to somebody. Sometimes getting that load off your shoulders can mean a big difference. If you don't have anybody to reach out to, or you don't feel like you have the resources, then reach out to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. And the one thing I want to leave you with is it's never going to hurt, only help. So that is the blog that I wrote that will go along with that episode. Like I said, it's a special episode. It's going to air on Friday, October 5th, and that is Mental Health Awareness Week, and that is on FarmHER on RFD TV, Fridays and Sundays at 9:30 Eastern. And Michelle's just one of the farmers that we talked to there on that episode. We also talked to Shelby Watson Hampton, who is a young farmer from Maryland. She was on our second season of FarmHER. And while Shelby herself has not had struggles, her family has dealt with the serious fallout of her older brother committing suicide. And instead of, and I'm sure it did overtake them for many years, but Shelby has kind of gone on a crusade. She, through Rooted in Ag with Syngenta, she won that contest and she received some money, and they put that towards creating a walk in their community about suicide awareness and prevention. And they've raised thousands and thousands of dollars for that organization. So, there's things that you can do, even if you don't struggle with it, there's ways that you can get involved and help elevate that discussion in your community. And we talked to a woman named Meg Reynolds, who is in Canada, and she is part of the Do More Ag Foundation. And she herself has struggled, but then she's part of this organization that is helping elevate the conversation in agriculture. And it's do more, it's talk more, it's listen more. And she gives us some great tips about doing that, again, on that episode. So again, I just want to leave you all with the comment that it's never going to hurt to reach out to somebody. It's never going to hurt. Don't worry what people think about you. It's only going to help. So with that, thank you for joining us on Shining Bright. You've been listening to Shining Bright by FarmHER. Be sure to tune in every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern and Saturday at noon Eastern on SiriusXM's Rural Radio Channel 147 and the SiriusXM app. And now, go shine bright.